Hi, Logic students. I have decided to make some videos on section 1.4. It's a very important section in our textbook, probably the most important, but it's easy to misunderstand some of the concepts that are explained in that section. I decided to make these videos and also to break the content into shorter videos to make everything more manageable. In this first video, I just wanted to comment on what we're trying to accomplish in section 1.4. Basically, this is the section that deals with the evaluation of arguments, because studying arguments is ultimately the kind of enterprise that has as its goal to determine or to become able to determine whether an argument is good or bad. However, good and bad are terms that are somewhat ambiguous, or they're vague. They have different applications in different contexts. So terms like good and bad are somewhat vague, not precise enough in terms of logic. So the first thing to understand is that in logic, you will use certain specific terms for speaking of the goodness or badness of an argument. And you have to learn these terms and be precise in their application. When it comes to a deductive argument, so you have to know what a deductive argument is. You have to be able to distinguish between deductive and inductive arguments. So section 1.3 is presupposed by this section. But when an argument is deductive, then we say that it's a good argument when it's valid and a bad one when it's invalid. So validity and invalidity are the terms that are important for deductive arguments. Whereas for inductive arguments, the terms that are important in terms of evaluating the goodness of the argument are strength and weakness. So we speak of a strong inductive argument versus a weak inductive argument. Then, in addition to these basic terms of evaluation, there's also a second level that we'll talk about a little bit. Let's put it this way, that an argument that is valid can also be sound or unsound. And so we need to understand what that means. It's a higher level of evaluation. And an argument that is invalid is always unsound. So right now, more than remembering exactly the meaning of all these terms, which we haven't talked about yet, what you want to do is probably just memorize the terminology. When it comes to a deductive argument, you speak of validity or invalidity, and then you ask questions about soundness and unsoundness. But you wouldn't use these terms for inductive arguments. For an inductive argument, you speak of strength or weakness, and a higher level of evaluation would be cogency and uncogency. And these terms, let me emphasize again, they're applied very rigidly. You would never speak of the strength of a deductive argument. You don't mix these up. Strength is an idea that you use only for inductive arguments. And similarly, you wouldn't use validity when you evaluate an inductive argument. So you have to keep these separate. The other thing that is important is that in evaluating an argument, you have to kind of wear three different hats at three different times. It's a three-step process. So when you're given an argument to evaluate, the first step is to determine whether it's deductive or inductive. So you have to be able to draw that distinction. And so you can fall back on section 1.3 and on the video for section 1.3. Once you have determined what you're dealing with, then you will conduct your first level of evaluation. So for a deductive argument, you try to determine if it's valid or invalid. And for an inductive argument, you try to determine if it's strong or weak. And then, depending on the results of that second evaluation, you put on your third hat. And for the deductive argument, you will also ask whether it's sound or unsound. For the inductive argument, you will ask whether it's cogent or uncogent. So it's a 1, 2, 3 process, and each step is separate. You don't want to use the same criteria. For example, when you evaluate an argument for validity, when you ask is it valid or invalid, you don't use the same criteria that you use to determine whether it's sound or unsound. And the results of your evaluation for soundness or unsoundness depend on the results of your previous evaluation for validity or invalidity. The best way to remember this is that's a three-step process, and you wear a different hat depending on what you're doing, whether it's first step or the second step or the third step. Now, this may sound a little complicated, but what I wanted to impress upon you is that the concept of validity is one that we understand at a basic level. Let me give you this example. I think this can be a foundation for the other videos and for everything else, indeed. If you look at these two arguments, you will be immediately able to determine which one is a good one and which one is the bad one. These are deductive arguments, so you'll be able to determine which one is the valid one and which one is the invalid one. The first one says, the cat is on the mat is in the room, therefore the cat is in the room. The second one says, the cat is in the room, cat is in the room, the mat is in the room, therefore the cat is on the mat. I think you can all see that this one is the valid argument and this one is the invalid argument. And there are several ways to explain why this is the case. The simplest one is to say that in the first argument, if these premises are true, it is true that the cat is on the mat and that the mat is in the room. There's no possible way for this to be false. You can even draw a little diagram for this. So the situation here is that the cat is on the mat. That's the information of first premise. And the mat is in the room. Okay, so if the cat is on the mat and the mat is in the room, there's no possible way for the cat to be outside of the room. If the premises are true, the conclusion must be true as well. In the second example, the first piece of information is that the cat is in the room. So we know that the cat is in the room. The second piece of information is that the mat is also in the room. But where exactly? The second bit of information doesn't say where the mat is. It could be here, or it could be under the cat, or it could be here, or it could be, the cat may be kind of a little bit on the mat and a little bit outside the mat and so forth. But the point is that the information contained in the premises does not mandate that the cat should be on the mat. In the first example, if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true as well. In the second one, even if the premises were true, the conclusion would not have to be true as well. Okay, so in the first example, the information contained in the premises entails the information contained in the conclusion, meaning that this information follows necessarily from the premises. Whereas in the second example, this information that is contained in the premises does not entail the information contained in the conclusion. That's what it means to say that an argument is valid in this case and invalid in this other case. So the definition of a valid argument is this: an argument is valid just in case if the premises are or were true, the conclusion would have to be true as well. Otherwise, it's an invalid argument. Notice that, and it's a very important point, and I'll emphasize it in the other videos as well. This doesn't mean to say that an argument is valid when the premises are true. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that an argument is valid when, and only when, if the premises are or were true, the conclusion would have to be true as well. Notice that in this case, for example, we don't know if these premises are true. This is all hypothetical. Is there a cat? Is there a mat? Is there a room that I'm talking about? I'm not talking about anything real here. I'm just talking about the reasoning. And I'm talking about a purely hypothetical case. But these two statements are not really true. I'm sure there's plenty of cats on mats in the world. I'm not talking about a particular cat here. I'm not looking at a cat right now on a particular mat in a particular room. So valid doesn't mean that the premises are in fact true and the conclusion is true as well. It only means that if the premises were true, the conclusion would have to be true as well. We're evaluating the reasoning. We're not evaluating the way the world is or anything of that sort. That's a different step, and it comes in later when you try to determine whether an argument is sound or unsound. I hope this is a good starting point. So this is the end of the first video, and I'll talk to you in the second video. Thanks.